concept or the idea of "with us is God" is a lot more profound, insightful, and deep than we would give it. When we're thinking about "with us is God," we're thinking Emmanuel. Emmanuel translates to "with us is God." Now, the name Emmanuel is the name of the living God. The name Emmanuel is the name of the living God, and the living God's name, we can have whatever we want to have for that name. We can call that name as we would call ourselves a name. This is what has been familiar in religious cultures from times beginning until now. But the culture within the Bible is different, and that's what makes this book so special. What makes this book so special is that while it is written in a way that a surface understanding of it can become through our reading what we're familiar with, digging deeper into it, the culture of understanding, the scholarship or the penmanship with which the authors of the Bible have written their philosophy, it is not what we think. Name in the Bible, as we saw our time together in times previous, name to the Bible does not mean literal name. Name does not mean literal name. Name in the Bible actually means a sentence describing the character of the ministry. Name in the Bible is actually a sentence describing the name of the ministry. The living God's name, the living God's ministry, is "with us is God." Now, in the language, this translates into one word, and that one word is called Emmanuel. The living God's name is Emmanuel, or translated, the living God's name means "with us is God." And so what we're seeing, when we're tackling this subject of justification, when we're learning that the Bible has described an individual and that individual's understanding separate from one another, and that justification occurring not by the individual or anything the individual can do of himself, but by the understanding articulated by that individual, we're seeing that there is a shift in how we are to approach the benefit that the Bible has for us. And we're seeing that that shift has also to do with a shift in how we take us, not us literal, natural, physical, us, our devotional conversations, conscience. Because if it says, "Through his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many," this is letting us know that justification is a process whereby knowledge is taken and redeems. Now, if knowledge is taken and redeems, knowledge is not physical. I cannot touch knowledge. I can't touch knowledge. I can't say I'm going to the store to buy some knowledge today. Gone to the gas station, I'm about to go in that gas station store and pick up some knowledge for $15, $16, $17.99. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do with that knowledge that I just purchased in that gas station store. Or I'm not going to go down to the scientific center in the heart of my city and be like, "Oh, listen, you see that knowledge over there? It's on that case. Let's pick it up. Let's see how much it's worth and cost." That's not how this works. Knowledge has no physicality to it. Knowledge has no visual. Knowledge is mental. So if by knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, we should know that justification has to do due to its having knowledge at its core for its resource, the strengthening, the healing, the bettering of what is mental. And the Bible primarily is for the mental, not of our physical, but is for the mental of our devotional. It is the mental state of our devotional conversation that is to be initially healed. It is this initial healing that will then backtrack to our human being, to where the mind within our human being will receive health from what we receive, from what we take in to our faith's intellect. This changes a lot. This changes a lot. And I love this subject so much because it is Bible. It is Bible, and is putting Bible in its right context. And in its right context, the Bible is highlighting a saying, a philosophy, a doctrine, and the experience of that philosophy or saying above the servant or any servant. Justification is to occur within, and this is something that we have been studying. And so when we think about with us is God, we have a question to ask, and that is, what is God? What is God? Now we have our beliefs about this, and we have whatever we have about it, and let that be what it will. But as we're seeing, the Bible has a narrative, and the Bible has its own context. And especially when it comes to defining this term called God. Now, turning to the book of Psalm, because we're going to get into this. Turning to the book of Psalm 119. Turning to the book of Psalm 119, verses 98 through 101. Psalm 119, verses 98 through 101. Psalm 119, verses 98 through 101 reads, Psalm 119. Psalm 119, 98 through 101 reads, Thou, through thy commandments, hast made me wiser than mine enemies, for they are ever with me. Thou, through thy commandments, hast made me wiser than mine enemies, for they are ever with me. I have more understanding than all my teachers, for thy testimonies are my meditation. I understand more than the ancients, because I keep thy precepts. I have refrained my feet from every evil way, that I may keep thy word. Now, there's association here. We've gone through this before. The Bible teaches through patterns of association. Through patterns of association. Now, in these verses, we can understand that thy commandments equal thy testimonies, and thy testimonies equal thy precepts, and thy precepts equal thy word. What is to, in verse 98, to be ever with? What is to be ever with is the word of the living God, or the commandments of the living God, or the testimony of the living God, or the precepts of the living God. Emmanuel, meaning God is with us, or with us is God. This psalm is letting us know that what is to be with us is a word. With us is God, but in Psalm, with us is a word, with us is a testimony, with us is a precept, with us is a commandment. Initially, the Bible is letting us know that God, in one sense, or in its truest sense, equals word. God equals word, God equals testimony, God equals commandment, God equals precept. Now this is foreign and this is strange every time I break this down, because this is where the shift in culture, religious, takes place, because I like to talk a lot about the Eastern and the Western side of things. And the Western side of things is that God represents a person as just such a human being. It goes back even to the Canaanite times, or to the Babylonian times, or to the Akkadian times, where God is represented as having a beard and having something in his hand, like a lightning thing, and sitting on a throne or a high chair. We're used to these things as representing quote-unquote God. But to the Bible, initially, this word God means word, testimony, commandment, precept. And we're going to hear it in its right context. So, the book of John actually starts with this. John 1:1, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So, this in and of itself, although the philosophy, being Greek, is very different from what the initial Bible is teaching in the previous Testament books, still, the author's letting us know that word is God. Just as the psalmist said that thy word, thy precepts, thy testimony, thy commandments are ever with me. So too, in the book of John 1:1, the word was with God, and the word was God in the beginning. There is no difference. The Bible makes no difference. Word equals God. God equals word. And of course, we know what word is. Word is doctrine. Word is philosophy. So when it comes into the context of the Bible, philosophy equals God. A specific philosophy, a certain saying, a certain precept, a certain testimony, a certain commandment is God. And so if we're looking through the Bible and we're trying to understand what God is Word. The Bible wants its reader to understand no personage in this context of what God means. No personage. No personage is necessary because Word has no body. Testimony has no body. Commandment has no body. Precept has no body. This is all mental. The Bible wants its reader to understand that God is to be equated with a word. A word is what is coming out of my mouth having a body to it, a physical body to it. Are the things going into your ears, whether you're hearing them from wherever, are there physical bodies entering into your ears? Are words, are sounds physical? This is what the Bible is getting at. When it comes to word is God, it is not something physical or a personage that is God. It is what enters into the mental. What enters into the mental? What enters into the mental are words. What enters into the mental are feelings, thoughts, energy, stimulated again by words. This is why it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. There is a particular word, a particular commandment, a particular testimony, a particular precept, a particular philosophy that the Bible would like us to know is God and ought to be honored in that context or that frame of mind. Now, if we can think about God in this way, the Bible will not just leave us empty and just be like, this is it, boom. The Bible will continue to give us illustrations to represent what it means. So, digging deeper into this, what does God actually mean when the Bible is saying, and the Word was with God and the Word was God? What does God actually mean? What can we break God down to? What can we break God down to? In the book of Psalm 46 and verse 1, we're going to fly through a couple verses just to see how this is broken down. Psalm 46 and verse 1, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Now, throughout the Bible, there is a consistent pattern of God being called strength. God being called strength. Psalm 46:1, God is our refuge and strength. Psalms 18, the book of Psalms, still in the Psalms, 18 verses 1 and 2. Psalm 18, 1 and 2. I will love thee, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my strength, in whom I will trust, my buckler and the horn of my salvation and my high tower. Again, God equals strength. God equals strength. Psalm 71, 15 and 16. Psalm 71, 15 and 16. My mouth shall show forth thy righteousness and thy salvation all the day, for I know not the numbers thereof. I will go in the strength of the Lord God. I will make mention of thy righteousness, even of thine only. And so we have the Bible here taking this word strength a step further in its association. God equals strength, and in this verse we're learning that strength equals righteousness, or that strength equals the salvation of the living God. God equals strength, strength equals the righteousness of the living God, or the salvation of the living God, and these are terms. These are terms we have discussed previously and have brought them up in dialogue to get their true context within the Bible. And so if we can understand what the Bible is saying here, that God equals strength, and that strength equals a representation of the living God's righteousness or salvation, we should then be moved to question, what does strength to the Bible mean? God has a meaning, and if that meaning of God has a meaning, what is the meaning of that meaning of what God is supposed to be meant to refer to, or to be referred as? One verse, Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 19. Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 19. The book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 7 and verse 19. Wisdom strengtheneth the wise more than 10 mighty men which are in this city. So in this one verse, we are seeing that wisdom strengthens. Wisdom strengthens. God equals strength. Strength equals wisdom. This is how the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches us through patterns, through word pattern associations. And if we can understand the right associations to the words that we're trying to refer to, or to the words in question, we will always understand what these words in the Bible mean. Of course, I'm flying through this because due to limited time, but there is a plethora of schemes and code where words and sentences refer to meanings, and to where those meanings are found in other words and other sentences, and to where those meanings and those words and other sentences are found in other sentences and other words, to get to a core understanding of what the Bible is actually trying to convey. Now, God equals word. God equals word. But in the same sense, in the Bible, there is a consistent pattern of God equaling strength. God equals strength. And strength, it is fair to say, equals wisdom. The book of Job 12 and 13. Job 12 and 13. And this is ridiculously interesting. This is ridiculously interesting when you get down to the heart of the matter and what the Bible is trying to articulate by saying that there will be a righteous servant that will justify many through his knowledge. This is very interesting because it depicts the experience we are to be having in our devotional conversation in relationship with the living God. Job chapter 12 and 13. Job chapter 12 and 13 reads, "With the ancient is wisdom, and in length of days is understanding. With him is wisdom and strength, yet counsel and understanding." So here we have the Bible giving us more terms of what this word wisdom means. Wisdom, we're learning, means understanding. Wisdom, we're learning, means strength. Wisdom, we're learning, means counsel. So when we're looking at this term called God in the Bible, we're only remaining in the Bible here. In the Bible, God equals strength. Strength equals wisdom. Strength equals counsel. Strength equals understanding. Wisdom equals understanding, counsel. These are all terms that are interchangeable and that mean the same thing. In the book of Proverbs chapter 8 and verse 14. Proverbs chapter 8 and verse 14. Counsel is mine. This is Proverbs chapter 8 and verse 14. Counsel is mine and sound wisdom. I am understanding. I have strength. So when we have strength, when we're saying God is my strength, what we are saying is that I have wisdom. I have understanding. I have counsel. Because to the Bible's mind, this is what God means. God means wisdom. God means counsel. God means understanding. This is why in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. There is a scheme to all of this, to where God is equaling Word and in a consistent pattern, and to where Word is equaling wisdom, to where Word is equaling counsel, to where Word is equaling understanding. In this context, God means wisdom. We're going to translate this according to the Bible. God equals wisdom. A specific wisdom equals God. God is not, in the Bible, in this context and in this frame of thought, an individual with a beard in a lightning rod sitting on a chair of a throne, surrounded by whatever he would surround himself with in some sort of parallel universe. That's not what the Bible is saying in this context of God, and this is also in the Bible. This other context of God is in the Bible. So from the very beginning up until this point, I believe I've always said that there are two ways of honoring the philosophy within the Bible. There is that primarily pagan way. 99% of the Bible is the pagan way. But there's a 1% that kind of overtakes that 99% of where it is actually supposed to be inward and mental. And so When we come to a very famous saying in the book of Philippians 4 verse 13, we really do know this. This is a famous saying, but in the context of what we have been discussing, its meaning will now shine a whole lot brighter. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. Now, if we're listening to this carefully, there's a separation here in thought of what is strengthening. The strengthening is occurring through Christ. The strengthening is occurring through Christ, and this is why it's so necessary to go through what this word Christ in the context of the Bible means, and what strength in the context of the Bible means. Through Christ, I can do all things that strengtheneth me. When we're reading this, how are we supposed to take this? And we can take this in our traditional context, right? So we believe in a personage and in a figure, and it is in this figure that I can do all things. So this figure then becomes an idol for my belief, even though the Bible says thou shalt not have idols. We have transformed a figure into an idol, and it is this figure that has become the source and the substance of all of our strength. Keep in mind, this figure is not giving us wisdom. This figure is not giving us anything to better our heart and our thoughts. This figure is not giving us anything. We are simply going off of the opinion of what we believe this figure would say to us and would be there with us in whatever we're going through. And we're taking this figure and we're believing that this figure is giving us strength because it traditionally has the scope and theoretically to do this. Now, that's not what the Bible's saying. That's not what the Bible is saying at all. When we get into the language and the context, I can do all things through Christ that strengtheneth me. It is Christ that is strengthening. Now, if the Bible is letting us know that strength equals wisdom, if Christ is doing the strengthening, this is allowing us to know that what is in reference to being strengthening or being strengthened is through a wisdom. I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. We have learned that this term Christ in context is a wisdom, a philosophy called Emmanuel, a philosophy called with us is God. This is what Christ means. So in right context of language, I can do all things so long as I keep in my heart and in my mind with me, with us is God. This changes the direction of how we should be handling our faith. This changes the direction of how we should be handling our faith because the Bible is allowing us to know that we need to move away from the physical stuff. And I've said this previously, and we have discussed this in times prior, is that the physical stuff, according to the Bible, and if we're going to take the Bible for what it is, the kingdom of God is within, or is acting within, or is active within, as it says, thy word, thy testimony, thy commandments, thy precepts are ever with me. The strength of the living God, the name of the living God, it is actually the wisdom of the living God that is to be with us. When it's saying with us is God, it is actually saying with us is wisdom. It is actually saying with us is counsel. It is actually saying with us is understanding. It is actually saying with us is a commandment. It is actually saying with us is a word. And this word is to be the key and core philosophy of our devotional conversation to guide us daily in whatever we do, privately or publicly, interacting with others. It is this core philosophy that is to allow us to be who we are supposed to be as human and as devotional beings. This is why it is called God. It is called God because this commandment in this philosophy is to be the all-encompassing thing that we mentally are to devote our energy to. This is different. This is different. And this is where, again, I make the changing of the Western and the Eastern culture. The Eastern culture is not so physical, or it's not so idolizing as we are. It is mental, it is inward, it is healing inward, and it moves from without. And so this is where the illustration of the living God's chief apostle crucified really comes in to play. Because with that body, the first apostle is letting us know, with that body representing the philosophy of the religious law, we're understanding why they actually saw this body as the philosophy of the religious law. It is to represent this because its crucifixion means the opportunity for the completion of the saying, with us is God. We can't serve two, right? We can't say I'm going to be traditionally denominated and to achieve my righteousness through belief on the theories that are put out there by Pastor so-and-so and the baptisms and the rites and the rituals and the different commandments and precepts and principles. This is how I'm going to receive my justification. And yet at the same time, I'm going to continue to have my faith and my experience. And so that I can then take that experience and that faith and make it be what it is supposed to be. We're living two different lives. And so the crucifixion of that body represents the separation of that old life. This is why Paul says, put off the former conversation, the old man. That old man is the old approach to the living God. That is an old approach. It is a retired approach. It is done. And yet be renewed in the spirit of your mind and put on the new mind, or the new man, which is the new devotional conversation, which is a conversation that is based, as we saw, Romans 12, 1 and 2, on the offering of our faith's body for the transformation of our mind to grow familiar with the will of the living God. So the crucifixion of that body is absolutely necessary so that we can understand that with us is to be a certain wisdom. We cannot know this wisdom so long as we're holding on to the wisdom in the religious world. And this is why it says in the book of John 17, I am not of the world. They are not of the world. The world has hated them because they have loved me. I pray that you do not take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil. The religious world is evil, and the living God's chief apostle admits to having no thing with the religious world and its philosophy, simply due to the illustration that the crucifixion represents. That body crucified means the crucifixion of our conversation relying on the theory of the religious world for sanctification. Get that out the way. And now what's left with, you're just left with your mind. You're left with your mind, you're left with your experience, and you're left with the words of the Bible. This is all you're left with. And we're left with this so that we can take this and so that we can digest it for a better conversation.